Guten Tag alle, Herr Wallis hier. Heute werden wir ein bisschen übers Perfekt sprechen. Today we're going to talk about the perfect tense, but before we do that, we're going to do a little review here of regular verbs or regelmäßiges Verb oder regelmäßiger Verben with haben used as a helping verb. And one thing you need to be aware of is when you're forming the perfect tense, whether it's the present perfect or the past perfect, in German you're going to use one of two potential helping verbs. So that's either going to be haben or it's going to be sein. So I'm just going to show you right now a few how we do these 5 tenses in German with a regular verb, and we'll use lernen for example. Ich lerne Deutsch. That's present tense, and it means I learn German or I am learning German. In English, we have actually 2 tenses that fall into this. We have the present and the present progressive. I learn German is the present. I am learning German. We would consider in English the present progressive. So in German, this is all encapsulated in one thing, which is just ich lerne Deutsch. The future tense in German, you're going to use the verb werden, which is going to push the other verb to the end of the sentence. So ich werde Deutsch lernen means I will learn German. So it's a little different from the word order that we have in English. We say I will learn German. In German, they are basically saying I will German learn, with learn being pushed to the end. A simple past tense of a regular verb in German follows the endings te, tes, te, ten, tet, ten, except for a few exceptions. And for more information on any of these tenses, you should probably watch our video over that. So ich lernte Deutsch. I learned German. One thing that I always want to note with this tense is that in German this is more written and not spoken, except for with a few verbs like haben and sein. It's often used in the simple past in spoken German. But for the majority of the verbs, Germans, when they're speaking, prefer to use the perfect tense. So that's what we're going to focus in on today. In English, we call it the present perfect tense. In German, that's called perfekt. And the past perfect tense in German is called the Plusquamperfekt. So the perfect tense, ich habe Deutsch gelernt. I have learned German. And then past perfect, ich hatte Deutsch gelernt. So now let's look at it with an irregular verb or an unregelmäßiges Verb. And we're going to use sein as the helping verb. And if you're confused at this point, don't worry. I'm going to try to go on here and explain it to you. This is more just an overview before we talk about the specifics. The present tense here with an irregular verb, we're going to use gehen, which is a strong verb. You might hear them referred to as strong verbs, but they're basically irregular verbs, which means they don't follow the rules and, well, they don't adhere to them completely. So present tense, ich gehe zur Schule, I'm going to school. Future tense, ich werde zur Schule gehen. One thing I should note also is that sometimes in German, which can be tricky, I guess, but it's really not when you get used to it, is that the present tense, or ich gehe zur Schule, can sometimes mean the future. I know that sounds confusing, but just bear with me and trust me that it can be used. The simple past tense, ich ging zur Schule. This is a strong verb, so it's not ta testa, but rather ich ging. Present perfect, ich bin zur Schule gegangen, which is I have gone to school. Und ich war zur Schule gegangen. I had gone to school. So now let's take a look at it to really explain it. The perfect tense in German has 2 important elements. Let's take a look at the sentence. Ich habe Deutsch gelernt. I have learned German. It has a helping verb, which is either going to be a form or conjugation of the verb haben or sein, and it has a past participle, which normally for weak verbs will start with ge and end in a t, although there are exceptions, and we have a whole video explaining some of those, so take a look at that. But basically it has these 2 elements, a past participle and a helping verb. And normally the past participle will be at the end of a sentence unless there is a subordinated conjunction or something that's messing up the normal flow, the normal word order. Okay, so most verbs will use haben as a helping verb, but some verbs will use sein. So what are the rules? When does this happen? Verbs that are intransitive, meaning that they don't take a direct object and clearly indicate moving from one place to another. Verbs such as gehen, fahren, fliegen, laufen. Gehen meaning to go, fahren to drive or to ride, fliegen to fly, laufen to run, und so weiter, which is German for and so on. In English, we'd say etc. The second rule here is that verbs that are intransitive, again meaning they take no direct object, and indicate a change in the state of being of something, such as sterben, dying, wachsen, growing, werden, becoming, verschwinden, disappearing. Okay? So in the case of these two rules, when you have verbs that fall into one of these two categories, they are going to use a form of sein as a helping verb. So what does this mean? This means, for example, like, oh, and these three verbs you definitely want to just make a note of. They always use sein. Sein itself will use itself as the helping verb. So ich bin nicht da gewesen means I have not been there. And what's tricky for English speakers, or if you have English as a mother tongue, is to be able to realize that been here means have. So I have not been there. Even though it's been, you don't want to, in the perfect tense, don't think of been as meaning am, which you might say, I am not there been. You say, what does that mean? But translate it as have, and you'll be much better off. Ich bin nicht da gewesen, I have not been there. Ich bin krank geworden, I have become, or in English sometimes we say gotten sick. Und ich bin hier geblieben, I have stayed here. And you'll notice in each of these sentences that the past participle is the last thing in the sentence. This is typical. In English, we say, I have not been there. But in German, they're really saying, if we did it, I have not there been. So it's a little bit different word order from the English perfect tense. So my question is, if you looked at these verbs, would you be able to tell me if they use haben or sein as a helping verb just based on the meaning of the verb? So remember what our two rules are for sein as a helping verb. It's going to clearly indicate motion from one place to another, and it's going to be an intransitive verb, meaning it doesn't take a direct object. Or it's going to show a change in the state of being of something, again, an intransitive verb that doesn't take a direct object. So gefunden, found. If you find something, you're not moving from one place to another. It doesn't clearly indicate that, and plus you're not changing your state. So ich habe ein Buch gefunden, for example. I have found a book. Now gefahren, when you're driving, you're moving. So you're moving from one place to another. So you would say ich bin gefahren. Gewachsen, you are growing, so you're changing. You're going from, you're changing your size, so you're changing your state. So ist gewachsen. Abgestürzt, like for an airplane, a Flugzeug. This is going to be a change in state. Yeah, well, you're moving actually. So this is also sein. Das Flugzeug ist abgestürzt. The plane has crashed. Gegangen, you're going, so you're definitely changing your location from one place to another, so use sein for that. Ich bin gegangen. Getrunken, when you're drinking, you're not changing your location and you're not changing your state. However, if you become besoffen or drunk, you did change your state, and that's a different verb entirely. But drinking is, ich habe zum Beispiel ein Coca-Cola getrunken. Singing's the same way, ich habe ein Lied gesungen. If you're running, you're definitely changing, so you're going to use sein as a helping verb there. Ich bin gelaufen. Geflogen, ich bin nach Deutschland geflogen. Du bist am Montag angekommen oder gekommen. Geworden, always going to use sein because you're becoming something. Gelogen, this is going to use haben. Ich habe nicht gelogen. And gesunken, when you sink, you're definitely changing your position there. So this is hopefully it gives you an idea. You're starting to get a rough feel for when to use sein and when to use haben. Just remember, sein is on those two cases that I've mentioned. You're clearly changing your motion, for you're going rather from one place to another. It clearly indicates that, and it's not a transitive verb but rather an intransitive one. And the second rule, remember, is that if it's changing its state. So let's take a look at some sentences here. How would we translate these into German? Well, the verb fliegen is to fly. We're going to use the past participle, which is geflogen. And for have, since flying, you're changing you're moving from one place to another, clearly you're going to use sein. So for have, we're going to use bin. So it's going to be ich bin nach Deutschland. And you use nach for to when you're referring to countries or cities, like I'm going to Atlanta. Ich bin nach Atlanta gefahren, for example. He has died. Er ist gestorben. sterben is the verb, the original infinitive. The past participle is gestorben or died. It uses sein as a helping verb. It's because it's a change in state. You're going from living to dead. Laufen, again, going to use sein. Ist zur Schule gelaufen. Have you fallen? If you're falling, you're changing your location. Bist du gefallen? Bist du runtergefallen? And he has become tall. Ist groß geworden. Okay, vielen Dank für das Zuschauen und auf Wiedersehen.